You're standing watch at 3 a.m., your unit is exhausted, dug into a position you've held for 6 days straight. Across the open ground, through your night vision, you spot movement. One man, alone. No heavy weapon slung across his chest, no aggressive posture, no team backing him up that you can see. He's just sitting there, still, quiet, almost forgettable. Every instinct you've been trained on tells you this is the easiest kill of the war. Slow target, isolated, barely armed. You'd be doing your commander a favor by reporting it as a non-threat and moving on to something that actually looks dangerous. And that decision, that exact decision, is the last mistake hundreds of soldiers in documented military history have ever made. Because the man sitting quietly in the dark, the one who doesn't look like a threat, is very often the most dangerous person on that entire battlefield. Not because he's lucky, not because he's some kind of superhuman, but because everything about how he was trained, how armies actually function, and how the human brain processes threat has been engineered deliberately to make you look right past him. This goes deep. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to look at every harmless-looking soldier in every war movie completely differently. Let's go. Let's start with the thing that sounds almost backwards but is actually the entire point. Looking dangerous is a liability, not an advantage, a liability. Every modern special operations doctrine on the planet, American, British, Israeli, Russian, doesn't matter which flag, teaches some version of the same core principle. It's sometimes called the gray man concept. The idea is simple but brutal in its effectiveness. The moment you look like a threat, you've already lost half your advantage. You've told the enemy where to point their attention, their resources, their fear. A soldier covered head to toe in visible gear, moving aggressively, broadcasting confidence. That soldier gets noticed, gets targeted, gets shot at first. Every single time. Meanwhile, the operator who blends in, who looks tired, who looks unremarkable, who looks like he could be anyone, he walks past checkpoints, sits in plain sight at outposts, and operates in spaces that should be impossible to operate in, simply because nobody's brain flagged him as worth a second look. This isn't theory. This is doctrine that's been refined over decades of real combat, written into training manuals, drilled into elite units until it becomes instinct. The most dangerous people in modern warfare are not the ones who look like action movie villains. They're the ones who could pass for a janitor, a clerk, a tired private nobody bothered to remember the name of. And here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just a military trick. It's exploiting something much older, something built into how every human brain on the planet processes risk. There's a well-documented bias in how people assess threat, and it's called salience bias. Your brain is wired to pay attention to what's loud, large, and obviously aggressive, and to deprioritize what's quiet, small, and still. This made sense for most of human evolutionary history. A roaring predator charging at you needed your full attention immediately, while a still, quiet shape in the grass usually wasn't worth the energy to investigate. But that same wiring becomes a massive blind spot on a modern battlefield. Combat psychology research consistently shows that untrained or even moderately trained combatants will overestimate the danger posed by loud, visibly armed, aggressively postured enemies, while drastically underestimating anyone who appears calm, still, or unthreatening. Loud reads as dangerous. Quiet reads as safe. It's almost the exact opposite of reality. In documented analysis of close-quarters engagements, the soldiers who lose control of a situation are disproportionately the ones who are agitated, rushed, and visibly aggressive, because that state of mind degrades fine motor control, decision-making, and accuracy. Calm, controlled stillness, on the other hand, is consistently associated with elite-level training. The soldiers who can sit motionless, breathe steady, and wait, sometimes for hours, without giving anything away, are almost never the inexperienced ones. They're the ones who have been trained the longest and the hardest. So when an enemy combatant looks at a still, quiet, unremarkable soldier and reads, no threat. They are, statistically, reading the exact opposite of what decades of combat data actually says. Now let's talk about why this isn't a new idea. This pattern, the quiet, dismissed soldier turning out to be the deadliest person on the field, repeats across military history, so often it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like a law of warfare. Take the role of the sniper scout teams used extensively throughout the 20th century's major conflicts. In multiple documented accounts from World War II's Eastern Front, scout snipers were deliberately selected, not for size or aggression, but for the ability to disappear. Slight builds, unremarkable faces. The kind of soldier you'd walk past in a chow line without a second glance. These were the operators credited with disproportionate numbers of confirmed engagements relative to the size of their units, sometimes outperforming entire platoons of conventionally equipped infantry, simply because the enemy could never identify them as a threat until it was already too late. The same pattern shows up in Cold War-era reconnaissance units. Soldiers trained specifically to blend into rural populations, to look like farmers, laborers, refugees, anything but a soldier, were tasked with gathering intelligence deep inside contested territory. Their entire survival depended on one thing: looking exactly like someone not worth questioning. And it worked, again and again, precisely because the human brain on the other side kept making the same mistake, judging threat by appearance instead of behavior. This isn't a one-off historical curiosity. It's a repeating structural feature of how warfare actually works, because every army on Earth has, at some point, learned the same lesson the hard way. The soldiers you should fear the most are very often the ones you stop paying attention to. Here's something that almost never gets talked about, and it's the physiological half of this story. Just like a sleeping human isn't actually as unaware as they look, a still, quiet soldier isn't disengaged either. There's a concept in cognitive and physiological research called vigilant rest, a state where the body appears relaxed, even motionless, while the nervous system remains in a heightened state of environmental monitoring. Elite military training deliberately cultivates this state. Special operations selection programs across multiple countries specifically test for the ability to remain physically still and outwardly calm for extended periods while maintaining full situational awareness, heart rate controlled, breathing even, eyes scanning without obvious movement. This is the exact opposite of what untrained combatants assume stillness means. To an inexperienced eye, stillness equals passivity, equals low alertness, equals an easy target. To a trained eye, and to the trained soldier doing the sitting, that same stillness is a controlled, deliberate state of maximum readiness disguised as nothing at all. It's the human equivalent of what predator-prey researchers call cryptic behavior, not hiding through invisibility, but hiding through being so unremarkable that the observer's brain simply files you under "not relevant" and moves on. The ghost soldier isn't tricking the enemy with some elaborate disguise. He's exploiting the enemy's own cognitive shortcuts against them. Now, let's be completely honest, because leaving this part out would make this whole video misleading. This doesn't mean every quiet, unremarkable soldier is secretly a lethal operator. That's not how this works, and treating it that way gets people killed for the wrong reasons. The pattern holds specifically for trained, deliberate stillness, not for soldiers who are simply exhausted, undertrained, or genuinely unprepared. The difference between an actual threat and a genuinely easy target comes down to control. A trained operator's stillness is intentional and total. An untrained soldier's stillness, by contrast, usually comes with telltale signs: fidgeting, inconsistent breathing, eyes that dart rather than scan, body language that leaks anxiety even when trying to appear calm. The historical ghost soldier pattern isn't about underestimating everyone who looks calm. It's about understanding that calm, by itself, tells you nothing about danger, and that the soldiers who survive longest in real combat are very often the ones who understood this lesson before anyone else on the field did. And here's the part that turns this from a battlefield curiosity into something much bigger. Just like a single predator's reputation can ripple outward and reshape the behavior of an entire ecosystem, a single overlooked operator's reputation can reshape the behavior of an entire opposing force. Once word spreads through an enemy unit that the harmless-looking soldiers in a sector have been responsible for a disproportionate number of casualties, something changes that has nothing to do with firepower at all. Advances slow down. Patrols hesitate. Soldiers start second-guessing every quiet, unremarkable figure they see, wasting time, energy, and attention on targets that may or may not even be real threats. This is the same mechanism predators trigger in prey species across an entire food web, a single inherited fear changing the behavior of everything downstream of it. In military history, this effect is sometimes called a force multiplier. One operator, correctly feared, can tie down the attention and caution of units many times their size, purely through reputation. The damage isn't just in the engagements that happen. It's in the hundreds of decisions the enemy makes differently, because they can no longer trust their own assumptions about what looks dangerous. That's the real power of the ghost soldier. Not just what he does when he's finally identified as a threat, but everything the enemy changes about their own behavior simply because they're afraid they might have already misjudged him. So the next time you're watching a film or reading about a real engagement, and there's a soldier sitting quietly off to the side, unranked looking, unremarkable, easy to ignore, remember this. Throughout documented military history, again and again, the soldiers who survived the longest, who caused the most disproportionate damage, who changed the outcome of entire engagements, were very often exactly that person. Not the loudest, not the most heavily armed, not the one who looked like a threat. The quiet one, the one everyone almost walked right past. That's the ghost soldier, and history has made one thing clear over and over again. Never assume he's not dangerous. You've probably already misjudged him.